If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.
This week is Pensions Awareness Week, the perfect opportunity to get on top of your savings for later life. Welcome to Which Money. Hello, I'm Lucia Ariano, and with me today I have 2 stellar guests, Paul Davies, Which Money pensions expert. Hi, Paul.
Hello there.
And Charlene Young, pensions and savings expert at AJ Bell. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure.
Well, it's so good to have you both on the show today during this very important week. Where shall we start? Pensions can be very confusing and overwhelming, can't they? How important is a week like this then?
So obviously we all lead busy lives, so pensions won't be top of list of things to do. But it's great just to take a moment during Pension Awareness Week to think about how many pensions we might have. Last time we had contact with our pension company, and also to get a steer on how much we've got saved to date, because money goes in via you, goes in via your company. But it's good to take some time to reflect at how on track you are.
And would you agree it's an important week? It's been around a while, hasn't it?
It has. Working in pensions and finance is kind of like Christmas week for me. So I appreciate that's not the same for everybody else, but it is 100 days till Christmas, as I found out earlier. So I think it's a really good chance for us to kind of sing the benefits of long-term saving and investing, why pensions are so great, why do we like to shout about them, and help people kind of take a bit of control of their savings and really help them work out how much they might need, because it is kind of a hard answer to get to sometimes.
And we'll be trying to get to that answer for you as we go on today. Shall we start with some kind of basics then, a bit of admin? Most people will be on what's called a defined contribution pension. Firstly, what is it? And what's the difference between that and a defined benefit pension?
Well, yeah, let's get stuck into the hard question straight away. So a defined contribution pension, most of you with workplace pensions will have a defined contribution or DC pension. This is where you pay money into the pot, your employer will probably pay money, and you'll get pension tax relief. And then you will ultimately have a pension fund, so you'll end up with a certain amount, and it's up to you to decide what to do next. But the amount you end up with will depend on investment returns. It obviously depend on how much you put in, and ultimately you'll end up with a total pot size.
And Charlene, what would you say is the benefit then of having a workplace pension?
Well, thanks to something called auto-enrolment, everybody who is employed earning a certain level of money, if you're over 22, is automatically put into a pension scheme when they join a new employer. So most of us will be invested without even realising it in some cases. And the great benefit of that is your employer has to put in at least 3% of a band of your earnings. Now, to make the overall minimum, you need to then put in 5%. But what you might find is, as part of your package with your employer, they're willing to put in more if you can also top it up. So, the real benefit of pensions as a defined contribution is just a pot, as Paul mentioned, is that what you hold in that pension grows free of taxes. You get tax relief, a nice bonus boost on the way in from the government. Your employer also gets their own version of tax relief, and it all goes into this pot that can grow tax-free until the point you come to access it. I know we mentioned defined benefit schemes very quickly. Those are kind of older style workplace schemes where, rather than depending on a final pot value or fund value. What you get depends on how long you've been at your employer, how much you were earning, and it's guaranteed for life. Those, if you're lucky enough to have one of them, that's a guaranteed source of income, but most of us will be relying on this pot that we're building ourselves, that fund, and then we choose to turn it into an income, turn on that tap when we come to access it.
Yeah, and as Charlene says, defined benefit pensions were the gold standard back in the day, but they're quite rare these days. You might have one if you work in the public sector, say if you're a doctor or a teacher. But yeah, increasingly those are disappearing.
So this week then, is it a good time, and is it recommended that people are thinking, okay, well, can I put in a bit more towards my pension a month?
It's a tricky question. Obviously, we've had a few years where people have not had spare cash due to the cost of living crisis. But if you can increase your contributions, that's good to think about at certain times. I saw some research recently. So at the moment, through auto-enrolment, 8% goes into your pension. So that's 5% via the individual and 3% via your employer, minimum contributions. But if you could increase that individual contribution from 5% to say 7%, that would ultimately mean a final pot that's £50,000 more than if you stuck with the 5%. So if you're starting early, at 22 is the initial age you can put money in via auto-enrolment. If you've got 45 years to contribute, and you can put some more in, ultimately with compound interest and the pot just growing over the years, you'll have a much better outcome.
And what about, I think it's quite normal these days for people to have pots all over the place from previous jobs. Is now also kind of about thinking, should I put those together or should I try and track them down? What's your advice here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the campaign as a whole has moved from just purely awareness, which is great, to kind of how do we strengthen people's pensions? How do we help them be more resilient towards their retirement? The first thing I would do is just check what you've got. Try and track down what you've got. We talked a lot about auto-enrolment already. Research suggests that people might end up with as many as 10 or 11 pots by the time they come to retire if they don't sort of round them up or track them down. And that is a frightening figure. It's about 30 billion, isn't it, Paul, of allegedly lost pensions. I'm not quite sure how you kind of quantify that. So, there's a vast pot of money out there that people might have already squirreled away and lost track of. So absolutely, the first kind of bedrock of awareness is find out what you've got. If you're worried that you might have lost track of one of your pensions, kind of have a think about where you've worked, even like dust off that CV. I think that would be my kind of advice if you really aren't sure, because even those of us who work in the industry, pension providers change name, especially workplace ones, over time. And there are ways you can track down lost pensions. So the government has a tracing service, which is really useful trying to find out maybe what that company is called now. Other companies, other providers have services where you put in some of your information, your work history, and they will help you track down those workplace pensions. So absolutely, one of the first things to do is kind of just like look under the bonnet. What have you got? Start looking at what the value of that pot might be, what you're paying, and what the investment options are. Because auto-enrolment, great for getting people into saving for pensions, defaulting them into it, but they might have other investment options under what you already have. And, can you round these pensions up perhaps into a lower cost account and then really take control of kind of your savings and move forward to strengthening them?
And is that something that is generally recommended, putting all of your pensions into one pot?
I mean, everybody's personal circumstances are different, but the reasons I would advocate for rounding them up and consolidating them, if you like, or combining, it's easier. We don't have statements all over the place, whether that's paper statements or lots of online logins. We've got different apps for all our banking and all of that. If we can get our pensions in one place, it's so much easier to know exactly where we are. And then that just takes out some of that step and that hassle of figuring out how you can get to where you want to be.
Yeah, eventually things should improve. There's an initiative called Pension Dashboards, which that
is something we've spoken about for a number of years on the podcast.
Exactly. I think my children were at primary school when we first spoke about pension dashboards, but hopefully back into 2026, the initial dashboards should be launched. So this means you should see all your pensions in one place via an online portal. so you can easily see how much you've got in each pot. And I think eventually the idea is that you can move money around between different schemes or consolidate, as Charlene says, into one place, again for convenience. So that's a little way off, but hopefully we're getting there. In terms of lost pensions, I think the 30 billion figure is astounding. So that constitutes 3 million lost pensions. So the average amount is about £10,000. So in terms of, is it worthwhile to try and trace these lost pensions? I think for the sake of £10,000, you'd say yes.
Yeah, it all feels so hypothetical, doesn't it? Like, it's really hard to, really truly understand what this means, all these pots of money, money that, probably a lot of us don't have in other savings areas. It's kind of...
I think, we looked at what could happen if you combined these pensions into a pot that just charges less. So if you move from a pot that was charging 1.5% a year all in to something half that to 0.75%, and there are plenty of options out there all in for that charge and less, you could add an extra £7,000 to your pot after 10 years, rising to £20,000 after 20 years, thanks to the benefits of compound growth and that those tax-free gains. Well,
there's a point. You don't move all your pensions into one scheme that has higher charges. Obviously, you lose out to a certain degree. And some legacy schemes still have exit penalties. So you need to check whether moving your pension from one fund to another will incur penalties. Obviously, that's something you don't want to do.
And is this something that you can do by yourself, or do you really, need an advisor to help you with this kinds of things?
It depends. So if you are a member of one of these defined benefit schemes, perhaps you worked at a company in the past that offered it, if you really are thinking about moving that, you must get advice according to the kind of pension rules and regulations anyway. As Paul mentioned, we have exit penalties still in some of these legacy schemes. And some schemes do, even if it's a pot, might have some guarantees attached to them. So, if you're at all unsure what's best for you, I'd always say go and speak to a financial advisor. But there are, for example, at AJ Bell, we offer a pension finding service that does help you track down these pensions. And it will give you a dashboard with a kind of colour code. So whether or not the provider has told us whether you have guarantees, what you should do next. And, always take a breath, take a pause, have a look at what is under the bonnet, like we say, what you're invested in, what features it has, and then you can make an assessment about whether it's best for you or speak to an advisor.
And looking ahead to us getting to the point where we talk about how much you need to have in your pot to lead certain lifestyles in retirement, shall we just talk about the different pots that make up a pension, your final pension? And what I'm getting towards is the state pension here. And I suppose just to start off with, what do we need to know about the state pension, Paul?
You currently qualify for the state pension at age 66. But that's going up soon. Between 2026 and 2028, that's going up to 67. It's due to go up again, but that's the government's going to carry out another state pension age review shortly. So that's the first point. You have to be very clear when you're actually going to receive it, and probably make sure you have enough private pension provision to bridge that gap. So if you wanted to stop working early and then had to wait to 66 or 67 to claim a state pension, you need to factor that into your calculations. So currently the full level of state pension is around £230 a week or £12,000 a year. Not everyone will get that due to something called contracting out that happened before 2016, and the need to build up at least 35 national insurance years. So that's either via working or obtaining credits, national insurance credits. So when you see those headline figures of £230, there's no guarantee you'll get that, depending on your national insurance and contracting out history. So it's a little bit complicated, but you can get a state pension forecast at any stage, whereby you contact the government and give them your details, including your national insurance number, and they will give you an indication of your state pension entitlement as of now, so how much you've built up, and also what you're on track to get at retirement age. So again, they project forward, assuming that you work in those intervening years. So that's always helpful, just to give you a guide to indicate what the government will give you alongside any private pension that you build up.
Mm-hmm. And if it's not the full state pension that you're entitled to, or you're not forecasted to get it, you can top it up, right? So I mean, how does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things I'd point out here. As Paul's mentioned, get your state pension forecast. It will show you how many complete years you have towards that entitlement, and then whether or not you've got any gaps. So gaps typically arise perhaps if people have taken time off work to have children, taking time off to care for somebody, and you can claim credits towards a full year of national insurance contributions towards that state pension, again via the same website where you'd look at a forecast. There's also a chance, particularly if you're close to retirement, to look back for 6 complete tax years to be able to top up your state pension record by making what's known as a voluntary contribution. Again, firstly, I would check that you've claimed credits for the years first before you start looking at whether it's a good deal for you to do that. Until recently, you could go back quite a lot further to top up your record. It's now kind of 6 complete tax years after the one we're looking at. But in a lot of cases, it can still be worthwhile, but it's, again, an assessment for your circumstances. So, yeah, those headline figures we see banded around that kind of £12,000 a year, really useful, guaranteed bedrock of your income. But as Paul mentioned, you might get more. Sometimes you might even get more, but you might also get less than that. And I think some research we did was really interesting. So we looked at people's expectations in retirement, and we'll come on to like income levels in a second, but really noticing in this kind of the millennials, Gen Z generation, skepticism about when and how much they might get from the state pension, which isn't ideal to have that skepticism, but also a bit of realism that, it's not there as the only thing to rely on, and a real expectation that they need to, and it looks to us like they are taking control of their own pension saving, which is really encouraging, because there's a lot of figures banded around that can be a bit scary sometimes when it comes to pensions and how much you need. So I always like to kind of pick out the positives and people really kind of engaging and hopefully taking control of their own savings.
Well, should we talk about then the different income levels you need for the kind of lifestyle that you want during retirement?
Yeah, there's a good benchmark called the Retirement Living Standards by an organisation called Pensions UK, and they have 3 levels of lifestyle or living standards as they call them. So minimum, moderate and comfortable. So minimum is paying your monthly bills, basically, not much in terms of leisure spending or holidays abroad. Moderate does include some trips away and maybe renewing your car occasionally. And then comfortable, there's some more luxuries or some leisure spending and more holidays. So the latest figures were actually renewed this summer, and for a couple the minimum level is about £22,000. So that's between 2 of you. Moderate is about £44,000 per year. This is, of course, and then comfortable is 61. For an individual, those respective figures are 13,000, 32,000 and 44,000. So we're talking about some quite chunky figures here to cover those levels. So it's down to you to obviously contribute towards your private pension. We've spoken about the state pension, which at 66, 67 will top up your private pension. But it should be a reminder that to deliver those levels of lifestyle, it probably means starting early, probably means contributing when you can. It certainly means not opting out of auto enrolment, which is obviously a bad move if you want to make sure your pot grows over the years. So there's some quite ambitious targets there. It's not to say everyone will be on track at present, but through Pension Awareness Week, if more people think about their pensions, think about putting more money in, think about what their targets are, it's a step forward.
And those figures are per year. So could you just give us an indication of, comparing a couple of them, what that would mean for the total pot that you'd need to save into a private pension?
Yeah, again, we looked for a couple. So taking the 2 higher figures. So for a moderate, retirement living standard of about 44k, that would mean a total drawdown pot of roughly about 390 grand, 390,000 between the pair of you. But that's assuming that the couple get the state pension as well. So it's a balance between the private pension that you built up yourself and the state pension. Looking at the higher level, the comfortable, that's in the region of £700,000.
It's a lot of money we're talking about.
It is, but you're talking about a couple over, say, a 40-year working life. So again, if you start early and the money goes in and compounds, and your employer will add to it, you'll get pension tax relief to top it up. So daunting figures, but it's achievable if you can make sure that you spend the time. And again, even if you take the time this week to see how much roughly you've got in your pot at the moment, and even do some simple calculations about how many years you've got left to work and how much that might increase by.
Well, actually, that got me thinking, have either of you crunched the numbers on those figures to find out, if you started saving into your pension pot in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, how much you'd need to be saving per month?
Yeah, I think I'd echo the sentiment. If you can, the earlier you can start, the better. And please don't be put off by some of the figures. They're really good numbers that Paul's crunched to help people understand what pot you'd need. I looked at a 30-year-old earning £35,000 a year, starting with absolutely nothing. Now, most people would have been auto-enrolled from 22, but we'll just start, for argument's sake, with nothing. They've asked their employer to match their contribution, so they're putting in 5%, and their employer is also putting in 5%. And that's becoming increasingly common these days. So it works out for the pension saver themselves about £145 a month before any tax relief. We had a look, and by 66, so the current state pension age, with pay rises, so getting about 3% pay rise each year, you could have a pot of over £300,000, about £315,000, assuming various investment returns and costs there. Looking at a 40-year-old earning about £50,000, if they already had an existing pot of £20,000, if you look back to that employer minimum that we talked about before, so your employer needs to pay in 3%. It's actually of a band of earnings, but we'll just say it's the whole 50,000 for these calculations. They'd need to get to that same level, they'd need to put in 8% a year from their own money. So it really does show the kind of power of time, compounding, and the benefits of investing. And I think, again, with Pension Awareness Week, lots of people, if you ask people, might not realise that they're already invested thanks to their auto-enrolment pension scheme. And it really, obviously investments can go down as well as they can go up, but they really investing your cash, particularly in this tax-free wrapper that we call a pension, is the best way of trying to beat inflation that we've all become very uncomfortably familiar with lately, and trying to give you that kind of growing pot in retirement.
Really interesting to hear those figures. And I suppose another thing I got from that is just that, it's never too late to start saving. And I suppose that's something that's a message that's being put across by this Awareness Week as well.
Yeah, and like we say, please don't give up. Please get started if you can. So again, we're all familiar with the cost of living pressures that we've lived through. So have a look at your budgeting. The retirement living standards are a really great place to start. They do make lots of different assumptions though. And I look at the moderate one and I think, oh no, I need about 3 more holidays than that, but I might not have other costs. And an important assumption is they don't include housing costs. Now, a lot of people retiring now will have hopefully paid off their mortgage, but some people might be renting. So it's again looking, they're a great starting point, but looking at tailoring something to you. So one thing I would do is have a look at what you're spending now. What's going to be your red lines? What are you not going to give up? So holidays, for example, what might fall away? Commuting, hopefully. I'm hoping some of childcare costs might eventually go, although my eldest son says he wants to live with me forever. So yeah, have a look at what you're spending now. Some people, in the past we've looked at 2/3 as a base point, but have a look in today's money. And again, those figures I've talked about, what you need to put in to get a £300,000 pot, for example, you might not be able to afford that now, but have a look at what you can afford when you're doing your budgeting here and now. explore that employer matching that I talk about a lot, but it's really important. It's effectively, you could be giving up free money. Hopefully your employer sings and dances about it because they want to attract people into these roles, but have a word with them, see what they say about potentially matching. Make sure you claim the tax relief that you're entitled to. So one of the big benefits of pensions is that the government gives you a bonus on what you pay in. It basically makes your contribution tax-free. There's various different mechanisms depending on the type of scheme you're in, but if you're saving into a SIP, for example, which is a self-invested personal pension, you might be entitled to claim more tax relief. It might not happen, all of it automatically. So make sure you're claiming what you're entitled to. Have a look at the investments under the bonnet as well. Auto-enrolment schemes are great. They come with a charge cap for what's known as like the default automatic fund. But you might have a look at someone in the 20s or 30s and go, that fund's not tailored to me. None of these funds are necessarily tailored to me, but I would prefer to take a little bit more risk because I've got a longer time to save for and try and really reap the benefits of that time to the point you come to access it. Have a look what's out there. And I don't want to preempt any questions, but we haven't mentioned self-employed people. And it's a real, auto-enrollment, brilliant. Talk about it all the time. Love it. But if you're self-employed, you don't get the benefit of your employer doing that for you. You have to take even more control. And I think Pensions Awareness Week for me, the real spirit of it is trying to get people thinking about their provision. Now, again, that definitely might not be top of your list if you're busy running your own business. But if you can reap the benefits of that time horizon, a little and often saving, there's a pot of money there for you. And actually, Paul, I don't know what your views on kind of lifetime ISAs are for under 40s, but self-employed people tend to sometimes find them attractive as an alternative for a pension.
Well, they come with a government bonus again, which is obviously attractive. And you're right, I've got siblings who run their own businesses and, they're so busy. And I try and portray myself as a pension expert and have a chat across the dinner table. And it's not top of their priorities. So, a reminder that there's lots of people that don't have the benefit of their employer sorting stuff out for them.
I feel like we could keep talking about this for the rest of the day, and there are probably many other points that you'd like to bring up. And I suppose just before we do wrap up then, are there any things that we haven't mentioned that you just think we should raise today?
Yeah, I think to tie up to finish 3 things to mention. I guess we've talked about auto-enrolment a fair bit. You can opt out of auto-enrolment, which you should never do, really, for all the reasons we've been talking about, in that, even small contributions compound and build up over years. So, if you're going through a time when your finances are stretched, do your best to stay within your pension scheme. It's such a good thing to do. And on contributions, again, it might be tough to increase your contributions. But if there was a time where you got a bonus at work or you got a pay increase, if you can put a bit more into your pension, again, some of the daunting figures that we've talked about are achievable. And something we haven't mentioned is potential pension scams. It should be a reminder that there are fraudsters out there that will look to try and get hold of your pension savings. So look out for flags. So if you're offered, say, a free pension review out of the blue by someone calls you or contacts you, that should be a big warning flag. A company wouldn't do that, and you can't access your pension till you're 55 anyway. So early access or a free review should ring alarm bells. So it might be the biggest pot of money that you hold. So, do your best to make sure that anything that seems dubious that you check up on, because, it'd be horrendous if you lost your pension savings.
Yeah, I think just kind of to go back to a point I've probably covered many times, but yeah, please don't worry. It's never too late to start. Obviously, if you can start earlier, the better, even if it is putting away a little bit and often. And I just realised that I think both of our dinner parties would probably be not what everyone would describe as fun, but, I do try.
So it's when my siblings started ignoring my calls to come around. I maybe mentioned pensions a bit too much, but there you go. They thanked me in the end.
A bit more fun with a glass of wine as well.
Exactly.
But it's been so great to have you on the show today. We've covered so much, and we'll get some links into some useful resources, SIPs, general pension tips, lifetime ISAs, a load of that stuff into the show notes of today. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media at Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
Do you want to reduce your energy bills? Or maybe you want to use greener energy? Go solar and get a discount. Right now, Which members can get a 7.5% discount on solar panels and their installation if you use Heatable, a Which Trusted Trader approved service. You can also include a storage battery and EV charger, handy if you're looking at making the switch to an electric car. To make use of this exclusive offer, simply head to which.co.uk/solar-offer. That's which.co.uk/solar-offer before the 30th of September 2025. And if you're not already a Which member, you can grab a year's membership for 50% off the usual price. To do that, go to which.co.uk/podcast offer to get involved. Start your solar journey today. Go solar and get a discount with Which.